There was a time when Dubai didn't just represent success, it defined it. A skyline rose faster than belief could follow. Airports never seemed to sleep. Marinas filled with superyachts, each vessel signaling a level of wealth that felt almost untouchable. Landmarks weren't merely visited, they were broadcast globally as proof that ambition had no visible ceiling. For years, everything expanded, everything accelerated, everything grew. Yet now, in certain corners, that motion feels quieter. Some marinas appear less crowded than before. Certain terminals remain efficient, but no longer overwhelmed. Developments still stand tall, though their surroundings feel less alive than their imagery once suggested. Not entirely empty, just no longer overflowing. And in places built around constant movement, that silence becomes noticeable. This shift isn't only about reduced activity. It reflects fading momentum. When a system is designed around perpetual growth, even a subtle pause can reshape perception. The question is no longer whether Dubai is impressive. It becomes whether that impression still carries the same weight it once did. This may not represent sudden decline. It may instead signal something more complex, a transition between what was promised and what is now being experienced. At its peak, Dubai offered more than infrastructure. It offered inevitability, a place where global capital moved freely, where luxury was not inherited but engineered, where investors, entrepreneurs, and high-net-worth individuals plugged into a system built for speed, efficiency, and visibility. For many, it functioned not as a destination, but as a strategy. Zero income tax, strategic geography, world-class logistics, a city bridging east and west with precision. It positioned itself not simply as a place to live, but as a place to accelerate outcomes. For a period, that promise appeared nearly flawless. Every signal reinforced it. Architecture, branding, economic indicators. Yet beneath the surface, the system relied on something less visible. Sustained belief, continuous inflow, ongoing expansion. And when those elements begin to slow, even slightly, the contrast becomes difficult to ignore. Because the issue isn't just whether Dubai remains active, it is whether it still feels unstoppable. And that distinction is where the real narrative begins. For a time, that promise appeared tightly aligned with reality. Dubai positioned itself as more than a location. It functioned as a gateway, geographically and economically. A place where opportunity arrived faster, deals closed sooner, and systems were designed to reduce friction rather than create it. For many participants, that was the core attraction. Not simply luxury, but efficiency embedded within luxury. Private marinas were not just for yachts, they projected visible status. Airports were more than transit hubs, they represented global connectivity. Landmarks extended beyond architecture, they became declarations of intent. Each element reinforced a single narrative. A city engineered for momentum. During its most celebrated era, that momentum felt unbroken. Airports recorded surging passenger flows, linking continents through near-constant movement. Tourism climbed steadily year after year, strengthening its position as a global destination. Real estate expanded at a pace few markets could replicate, absorbing capital from across regions. Luxury developments filled rapidly. Hospitality maintained strong occupancy. Retail ecosystems thrived on international demand. The system did more than function. It accelerated. What became most striking was the interdependence. Aviation supported tourism. Tourism fueled hospitality and retail. Real estate absorbed capital generated across all sectors. At the center of this network sat perception. The belief that Dubai was perpetually advancing, always expanding, always outperforming. Yet beneath that surface alignment, interconnection carried inherent fragility. Because systems dependent on continuous inflow become sensitive to even minor disruptions. At first glance, nothing appeared weakened. But the issue was never growth alone, it was reliance on uninterrupted growth. As new developments entered the market, Supply began to outpace organic demand in select segments. As luxury offerings multiplied, differentiation became harder to sustain. And as global capital intensified, expectations rose in parallel. Luxury, by definition, depends on scarcity. When scarcity is replicated at scale, it begins to lose definition. This shift was not immediately visible. For years, ongoing expansion masked it. Yet gradually, observers began noticing subtle indicators. Increased competition among developments, greater reliance on promotional structures, a shift in messaging from exclusivity toward accessibility and opportunity. Each adjustment appeared minor in isolation. Together, they signaled a deeper transition. Because the issue wasn't disappearance of demand, it was transformation of demand itself. More selective, more comparative, more cautious. In momentum-driven systems, caution introduces resistance. Beneath that economic layer, perception was also evolving. What was once framed as limitless expansion began to be interpreted by some as accelerated scaling. Not instability, but dependence on sustained inflow to maintain equilibrium. And once that interpretation takes root, even quietly, behavior begins to shift. Because what may have changed is not the city itself, but the assumptions surrounding it. And when assumptions evolve, momentum becomes harder to preserve. Then came the moment when the system was tested. Not by a single failure, but by a convergence of pressures that revealed how much momentum depended on constant motion. Global conditions shifted. Travel patterns changed. Capital flows grew more cautious. What once felt like an uninterrupted stream of movement began to slow. In a city designed around speed, even a brief pause feels amplified. Airports that once operated near capacity suddenly appeared spacious, not empty in absolute terms, but no longer overflowing with urgency. Marinas that once symbolized constant affluence grew quieter, their activity less intense than before. At first glance, everything still functioned. But the issue isn't simply functionality, it is intensity. Because Dubai's system was never built merely to operate, it was built to operate at scale. When that scale adjusts downward, even slightly, the entire atmosphere changes. What makes this more significant is how quickly confidence recalibrates when a city's rhythm shifts. Investors, travelers, and businesses are highly sensitive to signals, especially in environments driven by perception. And those signals, while subtle, began to accumulate. Fewer spontaneous transactions, longer decision cycles, a stronger reliance on incentives rather than urgency. Developments that once sold themselves now require more persuasion. It's not that activity stopped, it's slowed enough to be noticed. And that is where pressure begins to build. Because the question is no longer whether Dubai can attract attention. It is whether it can sustain the intensity that once defined its identity. Beneath the surface, another factor emerged. Competition. Other global hubs, some established, some rising, began positioning themselves more aggressively. Cities offering similar connectivity, luxury, and business environments, but with different cost structures, cultural depth, or perceived stability. In a world where alternatives continue to strengthen, comparison becomes inevitable. For some, Dubai remained unmatched in efficiency and ambition. For others, it became one option among many. That shift carries weight, because markets driven by global capital are rarely static. They respond to relative advantage. When that advantage narrows, capital becomes more selective, more cautious, more patient. The point isn't that Dubai lost its position overnight, it is that its position began to be questioned, not dramatically, but incrementally. And incremental doubt accumulates faster than expected. Because what changed may not be the infrastructure, but the confidence flowing through it. And when that flow becomes less certain, the system begins to feel different. Not broken, but no longer untouchable. It's that they are not as alive as they were designed to be. At its core, the issue isn't presence. It is participation. Foot traffic that once felt continuous now arrives in waves. Luxury retail that once depended on high-spending visitors begins adjusting expectations. Hospitality remains operational, but with more variability in occupancy, more reliance on promotions, and more effort required to maintain flow. None of this signals failure on its own. But together, it creates a different rhythm. The result is a slower rhythm. And that rhythm reshapes perception. What makes this more significant is how absence can feel more powerful than presence. Half-occupied marinas don't suggest collapse, but they signal underperformance. Calm airports don't imply shutdown, but they no longer communicate overwhelming demand. Within high-visibility environments, perception is everything. Luxury was never just about what exists, it was about how it feels. As that feeling becomes quieter, more measured, more managed, the narrative begins to shift. Developers and operators respond, but even those responses reveal the change. Incentives become more visible. Marketing leans toward value rather than pure exclusivity. Payment flexibility increases. Offers extend further than they once needed to. Subtle adjustments, but meaningful ones. Because the question is no longer how fast can this grow, it is how consistently can this perform. A very different question. Beneath the surface, the real shift is behavioral. Investors hesitate longer. Tourists compare more carefully. Businesses analyze more deeply before committing. The automatic confidence that once drove rapid decisions becomes conditional. Measured. Selective. The point isn't that Dubai has stopped functioning, it's that it no longer feels frictionless. Once friction enters a system built on speed, the impact spreads quietly. Not through collapse, but through recalibration. Because what changed may not be the structures themselves, but the expectations surrounding them. And when expectations adjust, value follows. As expectations recalibrated, something more subtle began to happen. Attention started to redistribute, not away from Dubai entirely, but away from the idea that it was the only direction of premium global growth. For years, its identity had been reinforced through repetition: fastest, boldest, most ambitious. A city where scale itself became a selling point. Over time, however, scale alone stopped being enough to guarantee preference. And the issue isn't simply competition, it is comparison at a deeper level. Global buyers are no longer evaluating destinations in isolation. They are weighing them against alternatives that feel increasingly refined, sometimes quieter, sometimes older, but often more structurally familiar. In certain European coastal cities, luxury is embedded within historical continuity. In parts of Asia, development is layered into dense cultural ecosystems. In North America, market depth and legal familiarity create a different form of confidence. In that expanding landscape, Dubai is no longer the only answer. But beneath the surface, something more important is shifting. The definition of luxury itself. Luxury was once driven by spectacle: what can be built, what can be displayed, what can be achieved visibly. What appears to be changing is the weight placed on permanence, authenticity, and long-term stability. It's not that spectacle has lost value, it's that it now competes with trust, and trust is far more difficult to engineer. What stands out is how perception evolves in layers. First admiration, then normalization, then comparison, and finally, reassessment. For some investors and visitors, what once felt like a breakthrough begins to resemble a model that requires continuous justification. That is where pressure begins to form. Because the system does not fail loudly. It adjusts quietly to changing belief. Occupancy patterns become more variable. High-end transactions require greater negotiation. Development timelines grow more sensitive to global sentiment. Even successful projects must work harder to maintain attention. None of this signals disappearance, but it does indicate maturity or saturation, depending on perspective. In mature systems, growth is no longer assumed. It must be repeatedly earned. What makes this more significant is how quickly narratives evolve once certainty fades. The same skyline that once symbolized unstoppable ascent can, under different conditions, begin to represent scale that must now be sustained rather than automatically admired. It is not the architecture that changes, it is the interpretation. And once interpretation shifts, everything connected to it begins to adjust in parallel. Because what changed may not be the destination, but the story global capital is willing to attach to it. And in a system driven by perception, that story carries real economic weight. When systems built on confidence begin to slow, they rarely announce it. There is no single defining moment. Instead, the shift arrives through accumulation, hesitation, comparison, and recalibrated expectations that quietly reshape the direction of capital. Dubai, in this broader interpretation, is not simply a place under pressure. It is a case study in how modern prestige behaves when tested over time. Because the issue isn't just infrastructure, it is perception layered on top of infrastructure. And perception is far more volatile than concrete or steel. At first glance, everything still appears intact. Airports operate, marinas exist. The skyline remains one of the most recognizable in the world. But beneath that visibility, the question becomes more subtle. Not whether the system works, but whether it still feels inevitable. And that distinction matters. Because luxury was supposed to signal permanence. Instead, it increasingly depends on continuous validation, continuous demand, continuous inflow, continuous global attention. When those inputs remain strong, the system feels untouchable. When they soften, even slightly, the feeling changes. And what makes this more significant is that nothing needs to fail for perception to shift. Empty space where there was once density. Slower turnover where there was once urgency. More comparison, less assumption. The silence begins to define the space. Looking forward, several plausible trajectories emerge. One is stabilization. A rebalancing where Dubai continues as a global hub, but with more measured growth, more selective demand, and a stronger emphasis on sustainability over spectacle. In this version, the system does not break, it matures. Another is stagnation. A prolonged phase where supply and demand settle into a less dynamic equilibrium. Activity continues, but without the intensity that once defined the city's rise. Prestige remains, but momentum fades. A third possibility is reinvention, a shift in narrative from engineered spectacle toward deeper structural value, technology, finance, logistics, and long-term livability. Not abandoning ambition, but redefining it. Each path depends on a single underlying factor: confidence. Because in global prestige economies, confidence is not sentiment, it is infrastructure. It determines pricing, liquidity, movement, and belief. Once confidence becomes conditional, everything else adjusts around it. So the question is no longer whether Dubai is finished. The question is what kind of system it becomes in a world where attention is fragmented, capital is selective, and luxury is no longer defined only by scale, but by meaning. And that leads to the final reflection. If the most advanced cities are built not just on engineering, but on perception, then what happens when perception begins to diversify? What defines success in that new landscape? And who decides when something is still rising or simply stabilizing?